Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is a little bit something different. Normally when I do these kind of videos, I tend to talk about movies that I've already discussed before, or I have already done a review of, but I wanted to talk about them again. But in this particular instance, it's something new. It's a short documentary, independently made, and the reason why I'm talking about this in this video is because this was actually a request from someone through my PayPal. I'm just going to call them Mr. Anonymous. So Mr. Anonymous sent me some money to my PayPal account and asked me to review and talk about this documentary. And so here we are. So if you want to donate to my PayPal and request certain films for me to review or topics to discuss, you can do that through my PayPal account. I'm gonna have my PayPal donate link in the bottom of the video description, so just go ahead and check that out, follow the link, and I will try to get to that request or whatever you're asking me to do as soon as I possibly can. So that's an option if you want to take it. If not, that's totally fine as well. But now let's get into the topic of the video. A documentary called The King of Catalog. Now, this is clearly a labor of love by Travis Baker, and I liked this. It's a good length. It's only like 26 minutes long. It doesn't really overstay its welcome. And even though I didn't necessarily learn that much new when it comes to vintage home video formats and stuff like that, it was still worth watching because the documentary provided an insider's insights on the industry. Because the focus of the documentary is on Jeff Baker, who was known as the King of Catalog. That was his moniker. And he worked in the home media industry for many, many years. He started out working at RCA, Columbia Home. I think it was just RCA. I don't think it was Columbia yet. So he worked at RCA. He was heavily involved with RCA around the time when they were rolling out the CEDs, the capacitance electronic discs. For those of you who might not know what a CED is, the CED was a format to play movies that was around in the early 80s, around the same time as Laserdisc and the first beta and VHS, first beta and VCR players. And CED, I think it was also known as Selectavision, although I could be wrong. That might have actually been a Laserdisc thing because there was a lot of different Laserdisc stuff. There's disco. I think that was the CED, the Selectavision, because the Laserdiscs were known as Disco Vision for a certain time because hey, it's the 70s, disco's hot, so let's name our home media format after the popular style of music in the 70s. Yeah, that definitely has aged really well. They dropped that pretty soon after, like once everyone's like disco sucks, they dropped it. But anyway, the CEDs, the capacitance electronic discs, are these discs that are similar to records because they play in a very similar way with a stylus that hold information, and in this case, they hold movies. I don't know if they had any shows or anything at the time. And it was a very short-lived vintage home media format. For one, because just like Jeff mentions in this documentary, they didn't really market it as well as they could have. Also, they didn't really have that much selection upon release. When it first came out, there was only 25 titles. And you're competing against VHS, which has thousands of titles available for the consumer. It was really not a fair fight. And understandably, CD got knocked the fuck out by VHS. Um, and what's interesting about CED is when it was rolled out, the players were actually cheaper than VCRs. Folks, VCRs used to cost you thousands of dollars. Like VCRs nowadays, you can find them all the time at thrift stores and stuff like that for cheap. But back when they first came out, that was an investment that most people could not afford. So the CED came out and it was significantly cheaper. But the problem is they didn't really have as many titles. So that definitely hurt potential buyers and potential consumers from getting into that particular product. Jeff even mentions how they should have rolled out like 400, 500 titles at launch. And, I think that would have helped, but I still think the format would eventually have not been successful. And the reason why is it's incredibly impractical. It's even more impractical than a Laserdisc, because a Laserdisc is also similar to a record, even right down to the sleeves that the discs come in. But the Laserdiscs didn't take up nearly as much space, and they weren't as heavy, and they weren't as bulky or cumbersome as the CED. The CED was kept inside a rigid, hard plastic case, and you had to keep these rigid, hard plastic cases because that's what's protecting the disc from the outside elements. And this is also what you would put inside the player. You would take this big chunk of plastic and you would stick it inside this CED player, which acted a lot like a record player, which RCA was known for. And there would be a mechanism inside the machine that would pull the disc out of its tray or its slot and then play it. And the quality was a little bit better than VHS, but it wasn't significantly better from what I've seen, but might have been significantly better back then, because it's really difficult to tell quality comparisons nowadays with the different types of technology that we have at our disposal and all the other things that we've been exposed to as consumers and as viewers of home media. But it definitely did not take off. It was a pretty big flop for RCA. Now, Jeff left RCA soon after, and he joined the staff at Good Times Home Video. And Good Times, at the time, were trying to branch out and become a bigger company. They were having some success getting public domain titles and putting them out on VHS and selling them at certain retail markets. But they wanted to branch out some more and make more profit as a company, and also survive, because at this point in time there's a lot of different competition with these different distributors that were distributing VHS tapes. Jeff comes in, and he, because of his already prior involvement with RCA and with other potential investors, he comes in and is able to get a huge deal for Good Times. He gets a deal with, I believe it was MCA Universal. So he gets a deal with MCA Universal for their back catalog of titles that haven't been released on VHS or have already been released, or titles that weren't really considered to be that popular or that desired, and puts out these releases and makes them affordable for the average consumer. And this turned out to be a huge success for Good Times. That's where you got like releases like The Deep or Mad Max, or for instance, because he also made a deal with Orion, which is why there was a Good Times release of Mad Max. And through Universal, you got stuff like Halloween 3, Season of the Witch, And as somebody who only got into VHS years later, in terms of collecting it or consuming it in any way, I don't really have the fondest memories associated with Good Times home video. I even likened it to the opposite. Like, if you got a Good Times home video, it wasn't a good time because the picture quality was usually pretty bad. But that's because I didn't have the context of the release and why it was the way that it was. It was definitely a cheaper product. It was not made with the best possible technology at the time. But it couldn't afford, Good Times Home Video couldn't afford that anyway. And this is how a lot of people were able to amass pretty big collections of VHS tapes in the late 80s, early 90s, because these were now affordable for consumers. Because back in the day, folks, VHS cost you like $89.95 just for one tape. It was ridiculous. It was insane. And that's a big reason why the rental market took off around that same time. But Good Times was one of the first companies to really break into this new market and to release these competitively priced tapes that were cheaper than what the normal average price was at the time. He also talks about the little bit of the battle that Good Times had with Disney, because Good Times decided that they were going to capitalize on the success of Disney's Renaissance films like Aladdin and The Little Mermaid by creating their own cheap animated movies to release them pretty much alongside the Disney films. Jeff seems like he was responsible for the Asylum style of marketing, of let's churn out some really cheap knockoff movie and put it out there to the market and make the cover art look a little bit similar, or as similar as we possibly can, to the actual release without getting into any serious legal trouble, and just watch the money flow in from people who don't realize that it's not the same thing. And not only just that, but also from people who they can't afford to buy the Aladdin tape, so they have to go with the Good Times tape. Um, so Jeff's responsible for that particular setup, apparently. I'm not really the biggest fan of that, but hey, it's marketing 101, and it clearly worked because Good Times was raking in a lot of money with those tapes. Um, and they also won their lawsuit with Disney. Like, how many people could say that they won a lawsuit with Disney? Like, that's normally not the case. Usually you lose when you get in some kind of lawsuit with a company as big as Walt Disney. Even at the time, Disney was still pretty big. I mean, not as big as it is now, but it was still a pretty big giant in the industry. That wasn't enough for him to stay at Good Times, though, because I think something happened and maybe the VHS market fell through and Good Times wasn't really viable as much as it used to be. So he went to Rhino Home Video for a brief amount of time. I don't know how long he was there. He wasn't super specific on it, but it doesn't seem like it's that long, because after Rhino, he went to a job at Warner Brothers, because he was scheduled to do some meeting, I think, with Rhino or with Warner Music Group or something, and he impressed the folks at Warner so much that they brought him in and asked him if he wanted to take the position as the head of marketing at the home media portion of the studio. And that's something that Jeff was really passionate about, and that's something I really like to see and hear, is somebody from the industry who was about as passionate about these special edition DVDs that are jam packed with features and all these different extras as much as myself or other people are. I thought that was a really nice thing to see. He wasn't just doing this for the pay raise or just doing this for the money. He took this job because it was something he was genuinely passionate about, and for a small period of time it paid off. Like, he's the one that was responsible for those limited edition box sets at Warner Brothers that had all these different bells and whistles that a lot of these other companies today are emulating. Like, for instance, Studio Canal is going to be coming out with the Flash Gordon 4K box set that has the 1980 film in 4K and has a bunch of other extra features like a booklet and I think it's like some stickers and some other replicas of like comic strips, all this kind of stuff. Well, Jeff Baker was the one that first rolled those out with Warner Brothers, so he's honestly incredibly influential in that particular area. And not only that, because of his passion for extras and for going the extra mile with these releases, he was the one that was really responsible for Warner Brothers just turning out some of the best possible special features for any studio at the time early on when he joined the studio and was working with their DVD distribution and really putting a big focus on getting these filmmakers back in the studio and doing commentary tracks and doing all these other things and doing interviews and putting money into documentaries and stuff like that, and really changing the landscape of home media. So I think this is worth a watch for anyone who's a fan of physical media, just to get to know this man a little bit and to know his accomplishments and to not forget him and to not let his efforts and his work just go into the darkness of our memories, because that's something that could have happened if it wasn't for Travis and company, who put their a lot of hard work into this documentary. And all good things come to an end, and Jeff actually left Warner Brothers in 2015, and I think he retired soon after because Warner Brothers was really starting to not care as much about physical media anymore. They weren't putting as much effort and time and compassion into the special features and all these other things. And since he was so passionate about that, he just didn't feel like it was really worth working at that position anymore. So he retired. He mentioned some things about how at the peak of physical media, at the peak of DVD sales, I think it was in 2007, they had sold 14 billion worth of profit for DVD sales, and then in 2018 it was down to 4 billion. And I don't even know how low it is now, but it's probably still pretty low. I think a lot of that has to do with the market changing and all these other things, but it is something that is quite a pretty steep fall. And he had some thoughts about Blu-ray that I was, he had some thoughts about VHS that I was kind of like, I don't know about that. He was talking about how he feels that the industry gave up on VHS a little bit early. I don't think that's the case. I think they gave up on it at the right time. Once DVD started to come into the picture and became more affordable for the average audience, uh, most people were going for the DVDs. They weren't going for the VHS anymore. Uh, as much as I like the format, I'm not gonna agree with that particular assessment. But then again, he might be right, because I mean, he's an insider. He was a part of the industry. I mean, I wasn't, so maybe he knows some more information that I don't. I'm just speaking from my personal viewpoint on that. And he said something about Blu-ray, how it took a while for it to take off, and yeah, it did. But I think a big part of that was because of this HD DVD thing that it was competing with early on, because now it just enabled, there wasn't, when Blu-ray came out, it didn't really have as much titles, because all these different studios were had deals with these different companies. Like, for example, Warner Brothers had a deal with HD DVD. So, and I don't think he mentioned anything about HD DVD. I would have liked to have heard his thoughts on that, because I think around the time that HD DVD was being rolled out, I think he was working at Warner Brothers. So, yeah, Warner Brothers had a direct deal with them, and Sony had the deal with Blu-ray, and there were some other companies. So it took a while until there was a clear victor, and at that point, then Blu-ray, I think, started to pick up a little bit more. He mentions that the difference between DVD and Blu-ray wasn't as big of a gulf between VHS and DVD. And he's absolutely right on that. And I think that's another reason why it took a while to take off, because there were people who were skeptical, like me. When Blu-ray came out, I was skeptical. I made a video about Blu-ray. You know, I was talking about how skeptical I was about the difference between the two. And here I am owning Blu-rays and 4K discs. And there's a clear difference between the two now that I've seen it. But I could see why the average consumer was like, I don't know about that. This DVD still looks pretty good. And I think the thing is, when Blu-ray started to first roll out, the quality was better, but TVs hadn't really gotten to the point where they are now with 4K TVs or even the high-end HD TVs. So, unless you're going to pay a mint. So that also played a factor into the seemingly small difference between picture quality. Now, in terms of anything else of note that I wanted to mention about the documentary, I can't really think of anything. It was a really fun trip down memory lane, down the memories of this very influential man, and Jeff Baker, and just talking about his contributions to the home media market, and that was just very enlightening in a lot of different ways. Like I said, just to see somebody from the industry talk about it so passionately, and remember things so fondly. And also, I thought it was well directed by Travis Baker. I thought he did a good job, really keeping the narrative tight, and keeping the audience invested. I really loved the use of clips, and vintage commercials, and the photos, and little vintage interviews with Jeff, and so on and so forth. Really did a great job setting the viewer in the time that Jeff was talking about. It really did a wonderful job recreating what it might have been like to be a part of that particular era. I thought the cinematography by Scott Buck, I also thought that was really well done. It definitely didn't look like a buck's worth of cinematography. It looked very high end. The shots with Jeff, I thought, were really well shot. In particular, looked like they were shot with a really high quality camera, and definitely had a deft hand behind the camera work. There were also different angles, so it wasn't just one static angle, or there were some instances where they were some shots of Jeff from a different angle or a little bit more up close. So that was really nice to see in terms of the variety. And I thought the editing by Patrick Dixon was also noteworthy, especially how the pictures and the footage all was intercut into the documentary footage. You know, the interview, actually the interview footage. Sorry. So how all the different vintage commercials and photos were intercut into the interview footage. I thought that was seamless. And I really liked the score by Dacarius. It also just it also added that Back to the Future, you know, that kind of that retro feel. I thought the documentary captured the retro feel of this retro topic really well. In large part, the score definitely helped a lot. The new retro wave kind of instrumental score. I love that kind of music anyway, so it was really nice to hear it used in this particular capacity. Um, Anyway, I don't really know what to say, folks, except check out this documentary. If it sounds interesting to you, if you like vintage home media formats, you want to learn a little bit about a genuinely important figure in home media. It's definitely worth a watch. It has like 500 something views. That's way too low for something that had this much effort and care put into it, and definitely for somebody who was this influential to home media, to physical media, something that a lot of us love and care about. So definitely give that a watch sometime. It's a quick watch, even if you don't ultimately like it that much. I think it's still worth a watch just to learn about his contributions to the market and to the overall product. Um, but yeah, thanks for watching this video, and as always, I will see you later. See ya.